Welcome to Jewish Activists for Peace. Today we're joined again by Ofer Neman, who has been on the podcast several times over the past 2 years. Ofer is a Jewish Israeli activist, writer, and BDS advocate based in Jerusalem, known for his work on human rights and his insights into current developments on the ground. He brings an important Jewish Israeli perspective to these conversations. Welcome back, Ofer.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Thank you. If elections were held tomorrow, what direction do you consider Israel would take?
According to a recent poll, considering that the Israeli Knesset, the parliament, has 120 seats, so the distribution from the perspective of three blocks, Netanyahu in the right wing, the Zionist opposition, centrist, but again, pro-genocide, the liberal, the more liberal side, and a united bloc representing Palestinian citizens of Israel. So if you consider these three blocks, as far as I can recall, the distribution was 54 for Netanyahu's bloc, 51 for the opposition, and 15 for the United Joint List representing Palestinian citizens of Israel. This means that Netanyahu does not have a majority to form a government, but the same goes for the opposition. They would have to rely on some support by the Arab, the so-called Arab parties. I always prefer using the term Palestinian,
Mm.
and they will probably be reluctant to do so because we're seeing much more racism among the centrist liberals as well, saying we will not form any government or we will not even rely on the support of Arab members of Knesset. So it means that things may be in limbo after the election. Um, but it's clear that Netanyahu has lost, and this is consistent across polls, has lost, I think, around 10 seats or so since October 23, which he is still unable to regain. But the opposition is also too weak to form a government with its own majority. I think we'll have very hot elections.
Mm.
Netanyahu is likely perhaps to try and pull something, a trick, in order to stage a last minute surprise,
Yeah.
either an attack on Iran or some, I don't know, some political achievement.
Mhm.
The opposition will work very hard to tarnish Netanyahu for his responsibility for October 7th.
Mhm.
We're likely to see some political violence. And I know that some people are saying that Netanyahu and the right wing may seek to sort of cancel the elections. It's a bit similar to the discourse we're seeing in the US right now around the midterms, Republican attempts to sort of rig the votes or
Mm.
intimidate voters. Um, I don't think Netanyahu can really do that, just cancel the elections, but there will be lots of manipulations and aggression around the elections.
Mm. That segues me to one of my questions where I interviewed Dr. Shir, who explained that the elections due around October 2026 will not take place until Netanyahu determines that he will win. So only then would the elections take place. So in hearing what you're saying, it's as though you do agree with Shir on that point to some degree.
To some degree. And then the question that follows is, what is Netanyahu going to do? So one possible trick, and it's a terrible, I mean, it's not the appropriate word here, is something around Iran.
Mm-hmm.
But I think, so he's definitely trying to drag Donald Trump into another war with Iran. For now, seems to be somewhat reluctant, and Iran can hit back quite hard. Iran can hit back. Israel has hit Israel quite hard. This is one thing that Netanyahu may seek to do in terms of so-called, a positive achievement, such as another one of those sham peace accords, the Abraham Accords. I think that by now it's a lost cause. I don't think he's going to get there with Saudi Arabia. I mean, relations between Israel and Saudi Arabia have soured, even relations between Saudi Arabia and the United Arab Emirates. So I don't think he'll be able to present another significant Abraham Accord. He's also, I guess, he's working behind the scenes to get some third party states to receive Palestinian refugees or just, Palestinians ethnically cleansed from Gaza. He will
Mhm.
probably be working on that too, trying to come up with some sort of statement, a promise by some governments, some foreign governments saying, we are willing to absorb, I don't know, hundreds of thousands of Palestinians from Gaza and sell that to the Israeli public. I'm not saying that there is right now a foreign government that is willing to say that, but this is high on Netanyahu's agenda. So I'm sort of trying to brainstorm with you around things that he can sell to the Israeli public as an achievement. In any case, there will be a lot of scaremongering on his part and on the part of the opposition. He will warn that he is the only one who can be tough on Israel's enemies, and the Israeli opposition will warn that another term for Netanyahu and his allies means the end of democracy in Israel. I mean, democracy, but they believe that Israel is a democracy being harmed by the right wing, and they see themselves as champions of democracy in Israel. So the liberal opposition will probably run on that, saying Netanyahu will destroy democracy in Israel.
Let's talk about Gaza. Do you believe the current military strategy in Gaza is making Israelis feel safer?
Well, I mean, so you have to go into the Israeli psyche, which is quite perverted, and ask yourself what makes Israelis safer. I guess that to some extent, and this is horrible, and this is something that I reject, Israel committing a genocide in Gaza is something that makes many Israelis safer. They want to get rid of Palestinians, either force them to emigrate or kill a large number of Palestinians. So I'm afraid that Israeli violence in Gaza overall is something that way too many Israelis will tell you is making them feel safe. But I don't think that there are many Israelis who are confident that Israel has a bright future ahead, especially among the elites. We're seeing that many people with foreign passports are either emigrating or considering emigrating and worried for the future of their children. So, in the long run, I don't think that Israelis really believe that this approach can work, but they probably see no alternative. And when they're forced to make a decision, they will probably double down on racism and violence.
Yeah. Many news outlets and officials have referred to a ceasefire in Gaza, but what's the reality on the ground, Ofer?
So it's an ongoing genocide. It's just another phase. There is no ceasefire. I mean, um, it's an Orwellian term for what's happening in Gaza, calling it a ceasefire. So hundreds of people, I think at least 500, have been killed, murdered by Israel since the so-called ceasefire. Israel is still destroying parts of Gaza in northern and southern Gaza, which it controls directly more than half of Gaza. Israel is arbitrarily moving the border within Gaza, called the Yellow Line, without notifying Palestinians. Palestinians are being shot for crossing a line they're unaware of, or worse than that, just approaching a line. We have actually Israeli officers attesting to that they're shooting people just for approaching the line, not even crossing the line. And this is something that, international legal scholars should know, and has been translated. I hope it serves against Israel in one of the international legal cases. Of course, Israel is not allowing things that are absolutely essential, medical equipment into Gaza, in some cases, not enough food, um, no shelter for reconstruction materials, caravans. So, an ongoing genocide, and with this grotesque, I think it's called Board of Peace or something, with people like Tony Blair and Marco Rubio and Jared Kushner. Uh, they are basically trying to turn Gaza into a concentration camp run by Western forces, including Israel, with a long-term plan of kicking Palestinians out. Any reconstruction, according to the Trump and Jared Kushner's plans, with all the fancy skyscrapers that you're seeing and the parks and the ponds, uh, it's a charade, and I don't think it's going to happen, and I don't think it's going to happen for Gazans, if anything. This is the ongoing situation in Gaza, and of course, most of Israeli society, as we have been warning the world about the so-called liberal opposition here in Israel. Most of them have just gone back to business. They were all about getting the Israeli captives. Um,
Yeah.
Back, and even when they were protesting against some Israeli brutalities in Gaza, that was never their focus morally. So, in terms of who in Israel right now is actively protesting against Israeli atrocities in Gaza, so the answer is the same small minority, and that's it.
Yeah. What about if we turn to the West Bank? Settlement expansions in the West Bank has accelerated. Do you think this is now de facto annexation?
So, annexation has been going on for a long time. Right now, and that has been escalating since October 23. There's a wave of a new type of ethnic cleansing carried out by settler militias in the West Bank, supported by the IDF in Area C. Area C, that's around 62% of the West Bank, sparsely populated by Palestinians, and therefore a territory that Israel seeks to annex in the future formally. So what they're doing there, and this is so horrible that even some Israeli ex-generals have been criticizing that, is that settler militias, armed settlers, have been given free rein to terrorize Palestinians and drive them out of their small communities across Area C with the support of the Israeli military. Anyone on Instagram or watching critical media, not mainstream Western media, will see again and again, every week, every day, in fact, settlers going on a rampage and destroying Palestinian property, um, kicking Palestinians out of their dwellings, destroying tents, buildings. And so far, they are quite successful at that. And I think this is something for Palestine solidarity activists to campaign on, in addition to Gaza, because here we can really embarrass complicit Western governments. So Western governments have been saying as to Gaza that Israel also has a right to defend itself, all kinds of bullshit, of course. But in the West Bank, they don't even have this excuse of Israel is fighting Hamas. In the West Bank, Area C is under full direct Israeli control. Areas A and B, Area A is under the control of the Palestinian Authority, which is a subcontractor for Israel and the US, a collaborator. And so I think that complicit, morally bankrupt Western politicians, they cannot even come up with excuses when it comes to the West Bank. Yet we're seeing most Western governments choosing to look the other way, not impose major sanctions on Israel due to the ongoing ethnic cleansing in the West Bank.
Yeah,
And
exactly.
we should expose this hypocrisy.
100%. What has been some of this Israel state's response to this violence? Has anyone been arrested? Has anyone been charged, imprisoned? We see so much of this violence going on, um, like you've described on Instagram, on TikTok, on different independent media outlets, not on mainstream media, ever discussed that I've seen. Has there been any consequences to this militia?
Not really. When the Israeli police arrest a violent settler, it's usually a revolving door thing. He goes in and out.
Mhm.
Um, Maybe a slap on the wrist, something quite symbolic, quite minor, and we're not seeing Israeli citizens, Israeli settlers going to prison, for murder, for murdering Palestinians, for shooting them, or for aggravated assault and major crimes that are being committed. Israeli police, especially in the West Bank, the officers are often settlers.
Mhm.
So, I mean, it's basically they're one and the same. And the minister is Itamar Ben-Gvir, a religious fascist.
Mhm.
So the entire Israeli state serves the settlers. It's not just violence by the settlers, it's Israeli state ethnic cleansing.
Yeah. I'd like to turn to the recent Bondi terror attack. Which has deeply affected people across Australia and raised questions about safety, community relations, and political responses. Ofer, from your perspective, how do you understand the significance of this event?
So I think it's quite obvious now, considering Herzog's visit to Australia, that Israel and the Israel lobby have capitalized on that, on the Bondi Beach shooting, to deepen their efforts to delegitimize criticism of Israel as a genocidal apartheid state. They're using that. No wonder they are. And I have to say, I don't think it's a false flag attack. I mean, I've seen
Mm.
the some of the allegations that it's just orchestrated.
Yeah.
Um, but this attack is not coming from the core of the global Palestine solidarity movement, which is a very principled democratic movement for liberation, decolonization,
Mm.
and Israel and its supporters are using that to push back and stifle even basic liberties of people in the West too. I mean, we're seeing what Australian protesters are facing right now. The brutalities. You can say that in a way, this Israeli police is being Israelized, and Australian protesters are getting an Israeli treatment.
Mhm.
So the Bondi Beach shooting is being used, certainly in Australia, to stifle opposition to Israel's genocidal apartheid, to the extent that basic liberties granted to Australians are now being eroded by the Australian police, but most notably the Australian political elites.
Yeah. As you mentioned, in Sydney, police used special powers and heightened force, clashing with protesters and making dozens of arrests. Has this become news in Israel?
Not so much. If anything, the news is about hostile protesters or, anti-Semites trying to stop or oppose Herzog's visit.
Mhm.
Um, Israeli media, Israelis don't care about Australian civil liberties, about police brutality. And in any case, I would have to say that Israelis have become so desensitized that if they watch the footage from Australia, they will probably say, first of all, these are anti-Semites, they deserve it, but they would also say, oh, this is nothing special because this is what people, of course, not privileged Jewish Israelis, but what Palestinians and some ultra-Orthodox protesters, that's the treatment that they receive from Israeli police, and even worse than what happened in Australia.
Mm-hmm.
So, but of course, Australians and other people across the world are sensitive to the footage that we saw coming out of Australia, the protests against Herzog's visit, and it's shocking. I mean, to me, it's shocking knowing that Australia to some extent. I mean, I'm not talking about the terrible genocidal colonial legacy of Australia, but in terms of modern Australia, you would expect policing in Australia to be a bit different from Israeli policing.
Yes, exactly. Herzog's visit, as we know, triggered those protests. Do you think international pushback influences Israel politics at all?
Well, I mean, pushback from the US can definitely have an impact. I mean, if Trump tells Netanyahu something, then Netanyahu we'll have to consider that what Trump is saying seriously. And we know that there was some pressure from the Biden administration on Gaza. Of course, absolutely complicit in the genocide, don't get me wrong, but occasionally there was some specific pressure on some very specific issues, and Israel had to listen. And we can come up with some other examples as well. Western pressure, even European pressure on Israel. By now, of course, Netanyahu cares about, he's trying to sort of boost support for Israel among the far right across the West and entrench the alliance, especially with far right Christian Zionists in the US. Um, and he's not likely to listen all that much to what Europeans are saying. But in general, Western pressure can help, and that's why I'm one of those who are saying that the West could have stopped the Gaza genocide and chose to be complicit. So Israel cares about Western pressure, and more than that, we know that complicit, rotten, morally bankrupt Western politicians care about or are susceptible to the impact of domestic Palestine solidarity voices. For example, we have the British. I think right now he is the Minister of Health, Wes Streeting, a strong ally of Keir Starmer, considered to be a potential successor. Um, very much pro-Israel, saying in some public communications with Peter Mandelson, the disgraced British politician, telling Mandelson that Israel is committing war crimes before our eyes and saying that they, the Labour Party, they have to listen to the pro-Palestine voices and do something. And at that time, it was about the recognition of the state of Palestine, which is quite symbolic and meaningless, but but you can still see that this pressure coming from Palestine solidarity activists across the world impacts local politicians, including the senior figures who support Israel, and may bring about some policy changes.
Mm-hmm.
Thing I would like to address. There's also this claim about the fact that there was apparently some Google search coming from within Israel
Mm-hmm.
with the search term being the name of the Bondi Beach shooter as some sort of indication that, voila, this was orchestrated by Israel. I think that, I mean, if Israel is actually sending these people to commit these attacks, they could just be in touch with them directly. To me, this claim about, and it may be true that there was some Google search from within Israel for the perpetrator's name, it's actually perfectly compatible with an attempt to track this guy. He was probably or possibly on their list as a suspect, and they were trying to trace him. So, this fact is perfectly compatible with this explanation as well.
Thank you, Ofer. The fact that people were Googling the Bondi terrorists the day before the actual attack took place. Please correct me if I'm wrong, Ofer, but isn't Israel 24 hours behind? So when it occurred and they were Googling it, this was my own, I've come with this conclusion without even researching much and saying, well, when it occurred in Bondi, Israel was 24 hours behind almost. And of course, it's going to look like it's the day before, but it's actually the exact same day.
Okay, so that's an even simpler explanation. I was saying,
That's,
okay, let's go along with that argument and let's
yeah,
say that they were really Googling his name
yeah.
prior to the Bondi Beach shooting. So that's what I said. Now, yeah,
I
if you're
haven't
saying
done
that,
much research, Oprah.
hasn't,
I,
yeah, it hasn't occurred to me, but if you're saying that, then we have an even better explanation.
that's my own conclusions that I have not researched. But when they said that it was 24 hours behind, and in Washington, well, Washington is almost 24 hours behind. It's 17 to 18 hours behind. And Jerusalem or Israel, I think, is 10 hours now to 11. So I don't know. I'd have to look into it more. But right now, you and I are on different dates. You know, you're doing this on
Yeah,
the 12th of February, and I'm recording this on the 13th of February. So
right.
maybe it's as simple an explanation as that. Yeah. I wanted to also talk to you about social media shadow banning. Current contact, mentioning words like, for me, for example, Israel, Netanyahu, elections. This type of shadow banning really creates an information environment where important discussions about politics, conflict, accountability are being hidden or deprioritized, which limits public understanding and polarizes opinion. It raises questions about who decides what is acceptable discourse, which we've discussed before, and whether these platforms are curbing legitimate political debate under the guise of moderation. How do you recommend we combat or address this? My own personal experience, simply last week, I put up a short video, which normally I would get over 1,000 views when I used the word Netanyahu and elections, and it was with Dr. Shir Hever, who is so well known. I got 200 views. It was within 24 hours. There was a stark difference, and I knew that that would happen as soon as I put those words in. But I thought, hey, I want to test it. Thoughts?
Yeah, I agree. I mean, TikTok is pretty much gone, bought by, controlled now by Zionists,
Mm-hmm.
and people are leaving TikTok.
Mm-hmm.
There's some shadow banning on Instagram, on Facebook.
Yep.
Um, on the positive side, it means that we're winning because they are seeing that social media has been so effective in mobilizing people across the world, especially young people, especially across the West, in support of Palestine. And people are still posting about Palestine. And when I open my feed on Instagram, I see Palestine stuff, lots of people posting and organizing. And I see postings in favor of Palestine with that get impressive exposure.
Mm-hmm.
But it's an uphill battle, and there's also this new app just launched, Upscroll.
Mm-hmm.
I'm there too, and I hope they can sort of attract a large and diverse following, make it something that is even bigger than Palestine, because this will also, I think, this will help the Palestinian cause if we really have like a truly global, powerful new social media platform that is pro-Palestine and can also, bring people together around various good causes
Mm-hmm.
and draw millions of people. I think that can be powerful. But even if we still stay on these TikTok and Instagram and Facebook platforms, I still think that we're winning there too.
Hmm. I
Yeah, they're going to
agree.
try to shadow ban and censor, but I think that, if you look at public opinion polls, more and more people are sympathizing with Palestinians and seeing Israel's apartheid and genocide for what it is. So I don't think that they can just, shadow ban reality and public opinion.
Mm, great. Have you got anything else you'd like to add, Ofer?
No, I think we're good.